All right, we're back. Riding Side Saddle. I'm Tammy.
And Lisa.
And we are here with Pam.
Again.
Our women's health expert.
Yeah.
We are so fortunate to have her back for a third time. I'm super excited about this topic. The other two got me a little bit twitchy and got my hackles up a little bit. So I don't know, Pam. I hope this one... I'm going to try to behave this time. This time we are talking about... I've recently heard it referred to as the fourth trimester.
Ah.
Right. I was thinking stage and I knew that wasn't right. The fourth trimester. And I love that because it is a continuation of your pregnancy. Even if you're not pregnant anymore, the aftercare is just as important as it was as the care you take during pregnancy.
True. Probably both for you and for the baby.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So before we get too far into this, let's have Pam introduce herself a little bit more. I know she's been on a couple of times, but for people who maybe didn't catch those episodes, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and especially your nonprofit. I'm so intrigued by that.
The work that you're doing is amazing.
It's fantastic.
Well, I'm Pam Jankowski, and I am a wife and a mother, and I have been a doula since 2018. I am a fertility, birth, postpartum doula, and I also help women through infant and pregnancy loss. And I do all of that through Sisterhood Services, which is a little different than the nonprofit. Right now, the nonprofit is focused on menstruation and menstrual health. And Sisterhood Services is where I get to help women with a lot of other different issues like postpartum.
I love that.
So I've been through it a couple of times, and I've helped countless women through postpartum issues as well. So hopefully we can all come together and put some 2 cents in and hopefully help some other women out.
I love the fact that your services and what your passion is really very holistic, right? It moves from menstruation, which is a normal process every month, and then the specialties really is kind of what I was imagining as you were talking about Sisterhood Services and what you're doing as part of that. So that's amazing. How long have you been a doula?
I started my doula training in 2017, so it's been about 5 years. I started my practice only helping women with pregnancy and birth. And as I've learned more and I've done other classes, I've been able to expand into postpartum and infant loss and fertility as well.
That's so important too. I mean, we really don't talk about infant loss at all.
Or miscarriage, right? Pregnancy loss and
right, right.
It's such a lonely period, and I think postpartum can be very lonely in general, but when you're dealing with something that has really strong emotional ties, it's very easy to end up feeling unsupported. And so I'm there for women, and I hope to see more women doing the same thing.
What a calling.
Absolutely.
Nice work, Pam. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about postpartum care today. My youngest daughter recently had a baby, just last week, actually. Well, I don't know. Last week for me, when we're recording this. I don't know when this is going to come out, so it might be a couple of months from when he was born. But I have been trying to, while she was pregnant, prepare her for the postpartum period, because for me that was so hard. The first 2 weeks were brutal. To the point where I remember distinctly saying out loud to myself when my youngest daughter was born, it was one day within that 2-week period, remember this moment. This is why you're never going to do this again. It was so hard. And I don't know if that's normal or not, because nobody talked about it. So fast forward, now she's 25 and having her first baby. And so I was trying to prepare her for some of that, using ice pads and preparing meals ahead of time and being kind to yourself and letting people be kind to you, letting people help you. That's really hard for her. She's very independent, and her husband is very independent also. The two of them make a great team, but letting people help them is really difficult. So we were talking, Emily and I were talking, and I said, well, you know, what did the nurses or doctor tell you when you left the hospital about your postpartum care? And she's like, shockingly, not very much.
Right.
They handed me this pamphlet, this booklet.
Gave me a squeeze bottle.
That's what she said. They gave me a squeeze bottle. They said it's in there. Like they didn't really even explain to her how to do this. She had done a lot of reading and a lot of research, and we had talked about using the squeeze bottle and a bunch of other stuff, but she said, shockingly, they didn't tell me very much at all. If I had not done my own research, I wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think from a doctor and nurse perspective, like once the baby's born and everybody's healthy and in a stable position, they probably are like, okay, this is the wind down for us, right? Like you're
Our time.
being
Where's the
discharged.
moneymaker?
We're done now.
Yeah.
Money making part is done.
Yeah, like this is the wind down. Now go and talk to your OBGYN, like or your nurse practitioner or
and that's
the
fine.
pediatrician.
That's fine. I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not really fine, but okay. It's not like the mom has a follow-up appointment a week after the baby's born for herself. The baby
6
has an
weeks.
appointment. Right. The baby has an appointment.
Right.
Or even several appointments. But the mom doesn't. Nobody is checking up on her.
Yes.
And if you
Yes.
don't have a mom who does that, if you don't have that relationship, or you don't have a mom, or maybe you're by
mother
yourself,
figure.
not everybody has that familial support.
Well, and
Then what?
nowadays people move away from their families. It's very common for people to not have anyone.
Right.
They don't. Maybe the people they work with are the only people that they know in the city that they live in.
That's
Also
a really
very
good
true.
point.
Yeah. And so then what? You don't even know what's normal. Emily was saying, because I said, well, did they warn you about blood clots and, what is considered normal? She said, yeah, they told me if I had a large one, I should call my doctor. How do you define large? I don't even know what that means.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's tough. I think women need to support women in times like this, and we need to be each other's aunties
Yeah.
and show up and just show up and
Formal
be there.
and informal.
Yeah.
So my oldest daughter is, she's got a 2-year-old, Delight, and she is pregnant again, and she's coming up, I think, like 17 weeks. So I, in preparation for this episode, asked her, what are some of the things that you wish you would have known the first time around, and what are some of the things that you'd like to be more prepared for as you're coming upon this again? And a lot of the things that she really talked about was a lot of emotional changes, right? Like suddenly I am in this position where all of the focus from a requirements perspective is on me, right? We talked about being the default parent from pregnancy and moving forward, but she really shared with me how much, from her perspective, that was exaggerated. How do I learn to have manageable options for self-care, even when you are feeling entirely depleted and drained? What kind of nutrition can I help myself and aiding healing and replenishing and nourishing so that you can take on that default mode as a new mother, taking care of yourself and being able to have enough to help support this child in a healthy way too.
Well, let's talk about the expectations. You're expected to absolutely fall in love with that baby the instant that it is born. And you are expected to put everything you have into that baby the moment it is born.
Yes.
And The truth
That doesn't
is,
happen for everybody right away.
No, the truth is that 50 to 80% of new moms deal with baby blues. And baby blues is lasts from 72 hours to 21 days. Anything over 21 days is considered postpartum depression.
Interesting.
I didn't know there was a difference.
Me either.
Yeah, baby blues is short term, in quotes, air quotes.
21 days is a long
3
time.
weeks.
21 days,
Yeah.
3 weeks. Well, because you think about the entire time you're pregnant, all of your hormones are being regulated by the placenta. The instant you deliver your placenta, which is an incredible, amazing organ that you did not have before you got
created it,
pregnant.
right.
Yeah, while you grew the baby.
Right.
Yeah.
And then your body knows to get rid of that organ, doesn't need it anymore as soon as the baby comes out. How amazing is that?
That
Is
is
amazing.
But that placenta is what was helping to regulate all of the hormones in order to keep you pregnant. At the instant
Didn't know that either.
the instant that placenta comes out, your hormones start to plummet.
That's why.
So usually within the first 3 days after delivering, your hormones have decreased very close to before you were even pregnant.
Wow.
Really?
That's
That
a
fast?
huge drop
In
off.
3 days.
Wow.
And interesting enough, it usually takes about 3 days for your breast milk to come in. And then you start getting hyperdoses of oxytocin, the feel-good hormone, while you're breastfeeding. And that is making up for some of the drop in estrogen and progesterone
Interesting.
when you lost your placenta. Yeah.
So I'm remembering back to my oldest daughter, and I think it was right around that maybe 2.5 or 3 day mark. We lived in an upper apartment, and I had just
Oh, you mean when you were pregnant?
yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't preface that. After I had Deidre, we lived in an upper apartment, and it was probably about 2.5 or 3 days. We had gotten home, and I had laid her down, and she was sleeping, and the only thing I could think to do was be able to even get out of the apartment. Like I sat outside the apartment door and I broke down.
Oh.
It probably was that plummet of hormones. I was scared to death. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what have I done?
Poor thing.
Like, what have I done? And the anxiety, ratcheted up. And it wasn't a very long duration of time that I felt like that. But in that moment, it was like the end of the world was there. Like, what have I done?
Yeah. Our hormones are so powerful, and we ignore postpartum, especially. We ignore the strength of those hormones and the amount of change that is happening in our bodies. I mean, we acknowledge that our joints are different. We acknowledge that our hips are wider. We acknowledge all of these other things that came along with pregnancy.
Our breasts are heavy. Things that you
Right,
can
right.
see and really feel.
But we ignore the fact that all of these hormones that were in our bodies to keep the baby growing and healthy are now not needed. And our body is dumping all of that, which means that our emotions are dumping and our mood is dumping at the same time that we have all of these expectations on us.
To be happy and like the
It's the most magical moment of our lives, and women don't talk about it because we've been told that it's supposed to be the most magical moment of our lives when our hormones make us feel like this is the worst moment
exactly.
of my
What
life.
did I do?
Yeah. So
It's-
we don't talk about it.
It's so interesting, and even aside from pregnancy and birth and postpartum, it seems like that's a theme for most things in life, right? At 10,000 feet level, this is wonderful. right? This was successful. This has gone, great. But as you start to dive into the details, that's where all of that churn is. Like, well, it's actually not as great as what it might seem at that 10,000 foot level, right? But nobody sees that. People who are coming to visit you and, oh, congratulations, and, what a beautiful baby, and, oh, those things, don't worry, those things are normal, but they don't see the churn, right? Like day to day and hour to hour. And to your point, where am I in the process of the normal dumping of hormones, and what is that going to do to me, and what should I expect? Like, none of that is actually
And how do I
spoken
manage
about.
it?
Right. Even to just know. Like, if I sat outside of my apartment 3 days in and I knew this is normal.
This is because of my hormones, not because of the baby.
Right.
Not
Right.
because of a defect in my way of thinking.
Or me.
Yeah.
I remember it being me. Like, I loved her. It had nothing to do with her, but I was like, how in the hell am I going to do this?
Why
What
did
have
they
I
send
done?
her home with me?
Right.
Right. I'm not ready for this.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think more people need to hear that. And I am proud of you for
Thanks.
saying so.
Thanks. It only took me 27 years.
I think part of the problem is that there are expectations for sure, but we put those on ourselves too.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of women when they're in that state because they don't go out. You're not going to take your new baby out at 3 days and, sit at Target and cry, right? When you're pregnant, when you're more aware of babies, at whatever stage you're in, you see them out, you see them with their parents, you see them with their mom. They're not
It's
a mess.
blissful looking.
It is. It looks
Right.
easy.
Right.
You're having lunch, at a restaurant, and you look over at the table next to you, and there's a mom easily breastfeeding her baby.
Right.
Well, I could do that. Look how easy that is.
Right.
And then you get home, and your nipples are cracked, and they feel like they have just fallen off your body.
Right.
And now you have to attach this baby again. For the
Yeah.
4th time.
Right. And you don't even know if really you're doing it right.
Right. You think you are. Someone told you are, but it hurts like hell, so it must not be right because they said it's not supposed to hurt.
Right.
It hurts.
Right. That's what I mean, the 10,000 foot level.
Right.
When you see the person out at lunch, like, you don't have, if you sat down and had a
No.
true vulnerable conversation with that mother, she'd be like, yeah, it looks great in this moment, but let me tell you, I went through hell and back to get here.
Right.
Or,
the first 2 weeks, I thought my
Right.
boobs were falling off.
or this is what I'm dealing with actually right now. You just don't
Right.
see it.
Right.
Right.
3 hours ago was
Yes.
a totally different story.
Right.
Yeah.
I laugh because it's so ridiculous. It reminds me of social media a little bit.
yeah.
You're not going to post the really shitty stuff that happens with life, or even the mundane things that happen with life. You post the highlights. It's what people are looking for. Even if it isn't on social media, when you see that person, that woman breastfeeding her child, you yourself paint a picture around that, and it's a
Exactly. That's
picture
what I
of
mean.
perfection.
That's where you get your expectation from,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
I set my expectation based on my experiences, based on things I see and observe. I just watched that woman very easily breastfeed her baby. They're both happy. She had lunch with her girlfriend, and they had a nice lunch. The baby had a lunch while she had a lunch.
Right.
Everything was easy and wonderful. And then I come home with my new baby, and I can't do this.
What's wrong with me?
right? Right.
Or what's wrong with this kid?
Right. This is too hard. I can't do this anymore. If we knew that woman had that same moment, and you just have to get through it, and here are the ways you can manage to get through that, what a whole different outcome that could be.
And the statistics show us that women who have a lot of PMS symptoms while they're menstruating tend to have more upset postpartum. And then women who tend to have emotional or mental issues where they need antidepressant. So even if you needed an antidepressant in 1998 and you're having a baby in 2022, you're more likely to need an antidepressant after
During
you
that time.
give birth because of
Interesting.
the hormones. But nobody talks about that.
No.
Like if you went to your OB and your OB said, have you ever had need for an antidepressant? And you say yes. And she says, okay, well then my postpartum care with you is going to be a lot more hands-on.
I'd
What
like
a
to see
difference
you
that
at
would
10
make.
days postpartum
Yeah.
versus 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would make a huge difference in our
would.
society.
It absolutely would, because with that more holistic care, right, focused on your mental and emotional health, as opposed to everything good down there, slam the trunk closed, we're good.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like, looks like you're healing up great. I'll sign off
Really?
your papers so you can get back to work.
Why can't I stop crying?
Yeah.
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 And I'm not saying that they're all like that. I'm making a generalization.
Oh, well, everyone knows after 6 weeks you can go back to sexual activity. You can
Yes.
start lifting the laundry bin to go up and down the stairs. You can start doing all of these things at 6 weeks. That is an arbitrary number. There are a lot of processes that happen in those 6 weeks, but that does not mean that a woman is fully healed after
No.
birth when that 6 week mark hits.
I'm curious to learn more about that. Do you have more specifics around maybe some of the processes that do happen within the 6 week mark and some of them that just simply take longer?
Sure. It takes about 6 weeks for your uterus to contract down to pre-pregnancy size. So there's a lot
So that
of...
means you're well enough to go back to work.
Well, you're not going to have as much gas or abdominal discomfort from your organs shifting within your abdominal cavity.
I was being sarcastic. You know, I hope that
If
I
that
was
means
not
you
attacking
can go back to work,
Right.
then okay.
I was
You
being
can see she's
sarcastic.
getting feisty.
I am getting feisty again.
You said
Dang
you would
it.
be calm in
I
this
know
one.
I was going to behave.
Settle it, girl.
It's all right. You don't scare me.
I am very short. I don't scare many people. It's shocking to me, and that's why I said it in that kind of aggressive way. Just because your uterus shrunk up does not mean you're back to your old self.
Right. And there's a lot of pressure on women too
Yeah.
about slimming down
Yes.
after having a baby. And if it takes a full 6 weeks for your organs to go back to where they belong in your abdominal cavity, how can we expect to have a flat stomach when our intestines are up under our ribs like they were during pregnancy?
Right.
How can we expect to not have a belly pooch if our uterus is still larger than normal, than pre-pregnancy? How can we place these expectations on women when it's not even biologically acceptable? During pregnancy, your blood volume almost doubles so that you can support another human being.
Wow.
And it takes 6 weeks for that extra fluid in your body to return to normal.
That's amazing.
It is. Wow. So what are some of the other biological changes that take longer?
Getting your period is one that's huge that I think we don't talk about enough. Right after you give birth, you bleed. Mm-hmm. That's called lochia. That's not menstruation.
Oh.
That's blood that comes from the open wound that the placenta left on the inside of your uterus.
That's news to me. I didn't know that. Okay. Makes total sense, but I didn't realize.
Yeah, we grow this placenta to support the baby. It attaches to the inside of our uterus on the muscular wall of our uterus. And then after the baby is delivered, we deliver the placenta.
Right.
That placenta was totally attached to the uterus, receiving blood supply, all of the nutritional needs for the baby, the oxygen needs for the baby. All of those connections between the placenta and our body have now been separated, and we have a large wound. So until that heals, we continue to bleed, and that's called lochia, and that can sometimes take up to 6 weeks. It's just like when we scrape our knee, and if you overdo it, if you overexert, and the wound reopens and starts bleeding again.
Wow. Did you know that?
I did know that. Yeah.
Okay.
I did
I'm
know
the
that.
only one here.
Even like wearing jeans that are too tight because you're anxious to get into your pre-pregnancy jeans. That amount of pressure can cause you to
bleed
resume
more.
bleeding. Yeah. Right.
Interesting.
And it can be clotted quite a bit because your body is trying to decide whether
Heal
it
it.
needs to scab that wound or not. So postpartum, we do have a lot of clotting. When they talk about if you have any large clots,
How do you define a large clot?
well, for each person it's different.
Okay.
And you think about the placenta is a large organ.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
Almost the size of a dinner plate.
It's
It's
big.
big.
it's big.
Yeah.
So I would say a large clot would be a little less than a handful.
Okay.
Golf ball or bigger is definitely something I would be concerned. But when I had my kids, I definitely passed a couple of golf ball
Yeah, I
size
did
clots
too.
after.
I was nervous about it. I remember that. But to your point, I think in oftentimes, many situations, you don't necessarily know what a large clot means, even if you go online.
Yeah.
Like, see your doctor if you have large clots. Okay.
It's not defined.
Right.
I remember having clots big enough that I could feel them
Me too.
leaving my
Yes.
body.
Yes, me
Yeah.
too.
So,
Yeah.
and it didn't make me lightheaded, so I just kept going. Because I didn't know any better either at that time.
All right. So your menstruation doesn't come back immediately
Oh, yes, that's
upon...
what we were talking about. Yes.
Sorry, segue.
So remember from one of the last episodes where you ovulate before you have your period.
Right.
So they tell you that you can't get pregnant while you're breastfeeding. That's bullshit. Because you will ovulate before you get your period. And ovulation is what gets you pregnant, not a period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Duh. This is
how-
101 stuff.
That's how women go to their 6-week check and find out they're pregnant.
Pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once again, tracking stress, cervical mucus, what you're eating, that's really important postpartum too, because if you start seeing markers that you've ovulated, then you need to know that you need to use barrier method or abstain
Yeah.
if you don't want to get pregnant that quickly. But while you're breastfeeding, it's normal to not have a period for up to 6 months. If you are not breastfeeding, it's normal to resume fertile days and getting your period within 6 weeks.
Okay.
But it can take up to a whole year for your joints to go back to how they were pre-pregnancy because of that relaxin hormone that loosens everything up. I remember with my first pregnancy, I got carpal tunnel really bad.
So did I.
Emily said she did too. I didn't, but she said she did in both wrists.
Yeah. And it was interesting. It did take almost 10 months to the day for my carpal tunnel to go away postpartum.
So
it takes
as
a
long
long
as
time.
you were pregnant, essentially, it
Yeah.
took
Yeah,
to recover.
right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
They say 9 months up, 9 months down. We're pregnant for 40 weeks. Where does the 9 months even come from?
I don't know.
Where is that number?
I will tell
right?
you, that pissed me straight off when I was pregnant. I'm like, I cannot do math, especially in my head. But 40 weeks does not equal 9 months.
No. And
What the? Like, is the first... And I thought, well, maybe it's because you don't necessarily realize that you're pregnant until, a number of weeks in. Is that why they modify
Is it because
that?
there are a couple of months in each year that have an extra week?
there's all kinds of goofiness around that. And the truth is, most women are pregnant for 42 weeks with their first pregnancy anyways.
Yeah.
Or very close to 42 weeks. So, yeah, that's a Roman calendar problem.
A snafu. It really sets you up poorly.
Yes.
Because, I was a young first mother, the first time I was a mother, and I was like, okay, by this date, right? They told
you
me
had
this date.
calculated. Oh.
I was excited. Like, I wanted this. First off, I didn't love being pregnant. Secondly, I was really excited to have my baby in my hands. So when that date came, I was like, yeah, I was like, okay, here we are. And then it went. And then it went longer and longer. It was only 4 days, but it felt like 4 years.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was a week late with my first one, and I remember at one point I was like, "This is a joke.
Yeah.
I'm not actually even pregnant. They've been lying. Because if I were pregnant, I'd have had this baby already. So I must not. This is a joke. This is terrible."
Why don't they
starting to
place
panic.
more emphasis on the word estimated?
Right.
Now, they just tell you it's your due date. No, it's your estimated due date.
Right.
Every baby takes its own amount of time to cook.
Yeah, right,
It
right.
does. And your body, and I don't know. Maybe I'm making this up, but I feel like my daughter experienced many of these same types of things that I did when I was pregnant. And I don't know if that's a hereditary thing. You know what I'm saying?
That's interesting because you don't have the same body shape
We don't have
at
the
all.
structure. No.
No. Mm-mm.
But
Well, and she has genetics not just from you, but from her dad too.
Right.
yeah,
So
But you had similar pregnancies.
we did.
you have 50-50 chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't know if pregnancy was a you know what I mean? Like the experience of it, the same types of symptoms, or even the birthing process was very similar.
Yeah. There's got to be a link to that. Yeah. Wait, you were talking about a fourth trimester. So coming back to timing wise, the fourth trimester can last anywhere between 12 weeks and 16 weeks. So it's not like once you hit that 12-week mark, everything should be fine.
Yeah.
It can take longer for some people too.
Wow.
So in that time, it's really important to accept help that you're given, right? And to ask for help. And how hard that is, you were talking about.
It is really hard for some people. Yeah, I don't know how you flip that switch. And my concern is that for some women, they get to a point where they're so depleted that they're almost non-functioning, right? Before somebody can notice because they put up a front. I was like that. Everything's fine. I'm always fine. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. It was not fine. And I'd like to think that it's okay to let people know we're not fine. It's okay to let somebody bring over, pizza for dinner. It's okay to not entertain your whole family because they want to come and see the new baby. I know everybody wants to. I mean, I'm guilty of this myself. I was at the hospital. I was there when he was born, but then I went back the next day, and then I went back when they got home.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'll take the visitors if you can grab yourself a load of laundry. If you see some dishes stacked up on the counter that need to be taken care of. If you come with, some healthy soup so that I don't have to think about trying to make dinner tonight on top of trying to figure out this new person, right? Like that visiting thing is fantastic, but if I'm entertaining you as
Not
a
so
brand new mother,
fantastic.
That's different.
that is
That's
a very
depleting.
different thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, come in, great, but I got 7 loads of, baby pooped or puked on something, and I don't have time to do the laundry.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe my milk is coming in and
And I'm just leaking through everything I own.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I'd like to kind of go out on a limb here. One of the things as a doula that I try to encourage my clients to do while they're pregnant is to take a little mental inventory about the things that they're very independent with, that they absolutely cannot give up control over, and the things that would benefit them to welcome community into that they may have been doing all by themselves. So,
But it's something they could give up. If they have to give
Yeah.
up something, what would that be?
so like, say you really, really don't want anybody folding your underwear. So you don't want anyone doing laundry. Okay, so that's your task. But if you're okay with giving up meal making or dusting or vacuuming, put that on a chart right inside the door.
Oh,
Say,
I
welcome,
love that.
this needs to be done.
Right. It's a
And
great
let
idea.
them choose.
It is a great idea.
I think we're taught way too thoroughly that being independent is a value that we should all have. But as women, we really need community more than we need independence. And we need to learn how to ask for that. And if we can wrap our brains around it during pregnancy, it makes it a lot easier postpartum. Makes everything easier postpartum.
Yeah.
Well, and part of that 4th trimester for you as a mother is rest.
Yes.
That is a key ingredient.
Yes.
And we're missing that. We're missing that as a society.
sure.
We talked a little bit about, it takes a village. And those forced, I forced the door open when my grandson was born. I was a cooking fiend for like 2 weeks because I knew a couple of things. I knew that they could not manage that portion, right, on their own. And if I walked in with soup, I could hold that little baby for a while. Right? Oh, I made you some soup. It's still hot. Go and sit
Go
down.
eat. I'll take the
right?
baby.
Right. He's crying. I got a magic cure for that. Go have some soup. Maybe grab a shower. Right? Lie down for a little while. You had a rough night. I'm here. Here's your soup.
So you keep talking about soup.
Yeah, let's
And I
talk
said
more
something
that.
about, bring a pizza. But, I mean, honestly, the soup probably sounds like it'd be more beneficial.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to you, Pam, because I know that you're the expert on it. But I will say that in preparation for my grandson coming, I did just some Google searches on nourishing and healthful ways to be able to help my daughter too, right? Because she's my baby, and there is as much in order to bring this beautiful person onto this earth, it's traumatic, right? And there's and I shouldn't say it traumatic in the normal sense, but it is trauma to the body.
is a
It's
lot of
natural, but it's trauma. And I wanted to be able to take care of my baby, right?
That's very hard for a brand new mother to allow herself to be mothered. And I think that's a shame because we all need to be mothered throughout our lives and allow someone to nurture us. So I think that's a very powerful thing too, and being able to allow the village to take care of us.
Yeah.
But when it comes to food, I think the best thing to do is to remember, if you are breastfeeding, especially, 50% of the calories in your breast milk come from fats in your body. So eating healthy fat is good. So healthy fats are like olive oil, making sure you cook things in olive oil. Avocado oil. I've seen
Ghee?
algae oil. Ghee is okay. Even better than that, taking some omega-3s is really good. It's really good for everyone at any stage, but especially in postpartum. So remember that too when it comes to, like we were talking earlier about slimming down. Your body is not made to lose the fat while you're breastfeeding, or you won't have the calories in your breast milk in order to feed the baby.
Right, to support it.
So the other thing is try to eat a rainbow. And so everything on your plate try to make everything on your plate a different color. And you are encouraged to have high protein and carbohydrates. So I know a lot of people say that they don't want to eat carbs because they're afraid it's gonna whatever social media says about it at this point, but carbohydrates are really, really important for our bodies postpartum.
Yeah.
And protein is really important for healing and energy. So those two things are very important. And we were talking earlier too about how it should be warming foods. So soup is perfect, and you can put so many colors of the rainbow in a pot of soup.
Yeah. I'd seen things that like turmeric and ginger and, you know, those types of herbs that are considered warming. So why is it, and I read it and I did it, but I don't understand why the warming is most important.
So that keeps our energy up.
It creates a fire.
It creates a fire.
Okay.
It helps us keep going even when we are feeling depleted. So if we were to eat salad that has all the rainbow colors in it and it's really healthy, that's fantastic. But you also need something that's going to stoke your furnace.
Yeah, that makes sense now. Thank you for that explanation.
I think it's also important to remember to eat enough calories. I remember, I knew this woman, I don't remember how far postpartum she was, 3 months or so, 6 months maybe. And she thought, it's time for me to get my body back, my pre-baby body back. So I'm going to go on a diet. And she restricted her calories because that's what she thought she should do on a diet. And her milk supply dried up, and she didn't know why. And at some point, we were talking about this, and I said, well, you know you have to have enough calories to make that milk. That's a process that takes a lot of energy, and you need calories to fuel that energy. And I don't think women know that either.
Right. And it all comes back to brain health, too. The hormones that kick in so that we can breastfeed, so that we can create breast milk, start in the brain. And the brain responds to sudden changes in diet very poorly.
Oh, that makes sense.
Interesting. What happens when you choose not to breastfeed from a hormonal perspective?
Sure. So if you decide not to breastfeed, it will take a little bit of time, but your body will recognize that there are certain hormones that aren't needed. So like engorgement, breast engorgement usually happens on day 2 or day 3, right when all the other hormones are dropping. We talked about that. It should take less than a week after engorgement for your supply to almost be gone if it's not used, because our bodies, our areolas, believe it or not, the skin on our nipples react to the saliva of the infant.
I've read that.
So if there's no saliva from the infant even being presented to your areolas, your breasts will be alerted to not
no
make
baby.
any
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
breast milk. Yeah.
Interesting.
That is interesting. Fascinating.
And the same happens with pumping. So if there's no saliva being introduced to the areola, if all you're doing is pumping, your supply, it'll hard
drop.
to keep your supply up
Oh,
because your body doesn't have that to respond to.
I had no idea that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Fascinating.
So many things.
Yeah.
All right, so I asked this as we were wrapping up one of our most recent episodes. Give me 3 things that a woman navigating through that 4th trimester can do to support herself, if it's like just the 3 things.
All right. There are so many things.
I know.
But the 3 things that I would have to say is, even if you aren't able to sleep when the baby sleeps, rest. Just take a moment to close your eyes and focus on something else. The second thing is ask for help, accept help, and be honest when people talk to you about things, because everyone in your community does care how you're doing. And the third thing is be patient with yourself and with
Love
what's
that.
happening in your home. It's a huge change.
It is.
I think if somebody were to be fired or get a divorce or have someone die in the family, there's a lot of grace given to those people. And we forget that even positive things can be big stressors.
Wow.
And this is
Change is stressful, good or bad. It's stressful.
yeah.
Yeah.
So just be patient and kind to yourself.
I love that
I
one.
love that
That's my
too.
favorite one.
Yeah.
And I think by doing that, you are more apt to do the other 2 things too, right? That's awesome. Pam, once again, I cannot tell you how much I sincerely appreciate you spending time with us and sharing this. You know, even as women who are navigating away from, childbearing years.
We're old, Lisa. Just say it. We're old.
Fine. But we have daughters who are experiencing this
Yeah.
too, right? And setting them up for success in the best way is our role,
Yeah.
right? And it's a super important one. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pam. We appreciate you. Thanks for joining us and sharing all of this really insightful knowledge.
Thanks for having me, sisters. Okay.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.